This is Will Johnson, and this is Time to Connect.
Hey, Will Johnson. Thanks so much for taking the time to connect, man. How are you doing?
I am all right. I'm sort of shaking off the soot from a pretty good run with my friend John Moreland and leaving for Arizona tomorrow where my daughter is going to make an appearance in the new Pedro the Lion video. So,
Oh, wow.
home for just a few minutes basically.
Yeah, man, I want to hear about that Pedro the Lion video, but yeah, you are a busy man. There's a sense, I wonder, are you kind of making up for lost time because of the last 2 years a little bit?
Maybe a little bit although yeah, I don't know. It feels like everything kind of went from pandemic to 90 pretty quick, but at the same
Mhm.
time, it also feels like, the calendar's kind of written in pencil, so you might as well do it while you have the chance. Obviously, with respect to family and friends and self care and health and all that, but we might as well get out there and do what we can while we have the chance because we don't exactly know, we can't know when things are going to pause again. So,
Yeah,
just taking advantage of being able to work again, and it feels good to have that option again.
right on. And yeah, I think for me, COVID, obviously there's clearly a lot of really horrible things about it, a lot of downsides, but there are some silver linings. And one of those is that we've kind of learned to do this Zoom thing, and live streaming has become so much more of a reality. And I would be surprised if that just shuts down. I think a lot of bands, a lot of performers are probably figuring out, pandemic or not, live streaming is probably more of an option than it's ever been. And another thing is just, you don't miss your water till your well runs dry, right?
Yeah.
And having, as you imply there, having not being able to perform in these last few years or hang out with friends in the way we did before makes us appreciate it and more grateful now for it. So right on. But you, man, you stay busy anyway, whether it's COVID time or post COVID time. You're a guy who is just amazingly prolific. Not only, doing solo work, several band projects going all the time. I know you are an amazingly prolific songwriter. You're a painter. You are now a novelist. Uh, what drives Will? Why are you so prolific, do you think? Why are you stay so busy and create so much?
Goodness, I don't know. I mean, I've always half joked that I'm an only child from a small town in Missouri, and I'm sort of hardwired to keep myself entertained. I was that way as a kiddo, and a lot of that kind of followed me into adulthood, I suppose. Just a lot of the energy of, well, here's what you got, and what are you going to do to make today cool and hopefully memorable, at least on a certain level. And um, there there weren't a lot of spoils for entertainment or diversion where I come from. It was like get out and ride your bike or go play in the cotton field and find your friends and
Mhm.
come back home at dinner. And while that's not exactly the way I live at this point, still some of that resonates. And
Mhm.
I don't know. I guess I always like to have at least a little something to show for myself at the end of the day,
Mhm.
and it could be debated that certain days maybe I put a little more pressure on myself than others to come through, uh, either with a song or with a painting or some sort of movement towards something creative. But at the
Mhm.
same time, that's what gives me fulfillment and it's what makes me happy. And so naturally, I'm going to keep returning to that source of energy
Mhm.
as long as my body and my mind will allow for it.
Right on. And we're glad you do, man. I totally resonate with that. One of my mantras is kind of personal mantras is always be creating. I just it's something I'm really driven to do too. But I don't know, man. It's pretty hard to keep up with the output of Will Johnson. And another thing about you, not only are you super prolific, you're kind of legendary among people who know you for being almost savantish in terms of being organized and having a memory I mean, you could probably tell me the kind of joke when I talk to people about you is, yo, yeah, Will could tell you the day we met, what I was wearing, and who won the Cardinals game that day. What is you have anything to say about that? What's the secret to that, man? Why are you so organized?
I have a theory on why that may be, and I'm not as sharp as I was a few years ago, and I think some
Mhm.
of that is attributed to the kind of the 2-year fog that we've just kind of pedaled through. It feels like, you know, that fog has left the otherwise clear riverbank on the other side a little bit obscured now with
Mhm.
regard to time references and the ability to recall like I used to. But and it's also simple amount of volume. But I think part of it is because, and this was inspired by my mother. My mother always had a calendar on the refrigerator, and she would jot down a little something about every single day, even if it was the most mundane thing, like went to the grocery store, went for a long walk, read. Um, she would jot down something, a little something about each and every day. So in the spring of 1988, which I guess was my junior year of high school, I decided I wanted to do the same thing. And so I got myself a little wall calendar, and eventually that led to day runners and things like that. But I would jot down notes about every single day. And I found that with just the simple cataloging of just your activities or whatever you're doing, that sharpened my ability to recall what I was doing around, on or around a certain time.
Mhm.
And so there's a couple of holes here and there. Definitely during the pandemic, I've got some catching up to do with, you know, those little calendars. But by and large, since the spring of '88, I've just jotted down a few notes about each day, and I think maybe that helps. Um, just literally taking life notes. I think maybe that's helped my memory and helped the ability to recall certain things.
Yeah, right on. Yeah, I found that that's one of the things that's important if you want to be someone who creates a lot. It's important to be organized. You know, the guitar's got to be hanging on the wall. They can't be in a case in the closet where, or the canvases have to be on an easel or at least out,
Yeah.
and the paints have to be out. If you're not organized like that, man, it's too easy to talk yourself out of it, or or just not be able to. The switching cost ends up being more difficult. Well, hey,
Yeah.
listen, I probably should back up a little bit, and I jumped right into some personal stuff, and we definitely want to talk about your music and your painting and your and your writing. Although, you know, the point of these conversations is not just a music interview. It really, my intention really is to get a little more personal and ask some things that you might not normally talk about in a situation like this. I mean, my idea is if anyone wants to know about Will Johnson, you can just Google him. You know, you can Google Centro-matic and you can find out all the details you want. So let's not bother with some of those biographical details, although they might come up in the next 20, 30 minutes. However, I do want to ask you a difficult question, and that's sort of a biographical question, which is, how do you describe yourself?
Oh goodness.
Who is Will Johnson?
It kind of depends on the day. I mean, it depends on the job at hand, and it depends on, you know, whatever my priorities are at the time. I feel like I've become a little more mellow in recent years, just with regard to not trying I always joke about like grasping the creative, like grasping the stone too tightly, as my friend Christian Helms put it not so long ago. We were talking. It's like, you know, if you just loosen your grip a little bit, the stone is still going to be in your hand. It's not going anywhere.
Nice. Yeah.
And so I think I'm a fairly I'd like to believe I'm a pretty mellow, pretty low key individual for the greater part. I'm definitely entering a phase of life I've noticed where I just kind of, and I told this to my wife over supper last night. 'Cause we're talking about, you know, relocating at some point in the next year or two. And I'm definitely entering a phase of life where I just kind of want everybody around me to be happy and be pleased because we've been tested a lot lately. And I think that's added to my or that's affected my carriage or my demeanor to a certain degree. And so I don't know, patient maybe. I'm a fairly patient individual, but man, when it snaps, it's a bummer. it's disappointing when it comes to an end. But I feel like by and large I'm a fairly patient individual.
Yeah. Sorry for the pun, but you have patience for the ride. Huh? Yeah.
That's okay.
One of my all-time favorite Will Johnson songs. Yeah, man, that's cool. And one thing that's different about you now than it might have been in 1991 or whenever, maybe back in these days,
Yeah, yeah.
is that you're a
Soon.
father. You're a dad now. Let me ask you about that a little bit. What has fatherhood taught you, and maybe what's been the most surprising thing about being a dad?
Well, I mean, I think going back to what I just said, it definitely recalibrates you as far as levels of patience and levels of acceptance,
Hmm.
and it just reminds you that there are a lot of moving parts in our personal lives, and adaptability is key. There were days, maybe in my 20s or early 30s, where I might not have been so accepting of those things, but at this point, I mean, I can safely say that fatherhood is the most psychedelic and the most challenging, but also easily the most rewarding and
Yeah,
cool job I could imagine to have.
yeah,
And it's hard to explain sometimes, but it is it is the richest thing I've ever jumped into,
mhm.
and it rewards every single day in the coolest ways. I don't have to watch TV much anymore because I got I have a lot of entertainment happening
Yeah,
around me.
indeed, indeed,
Uh,
yeah, yeah,
I don't talk as much as I used to either. I just don't have to fill the airways that much.
yeah. Man, I feel you for sure. Uh, I go through a lot of the same thing, and I got to tell you, how old is your oldest?
He is 16. He'll be 17 next month, and our youngest is 3. So, we've got a pretty broad scope of ages and interests here.
My oldest is 21, and
Yeah,
I can't believe it. I can't. It's crazy how fast it happens, and so it's good that you're slowing down and you're appreciating it because, man, it flies by. Well, hey, let's talk about your music a little bit, and there's so much to talk about that we probably will just brush the surface of things, but
sure.
you I held up that Funland record, and wow, let's get that picture of Will there. Uh, what year would this have been? About 92 or
That
so?
picture, that picture was taken right around November 1st, 1992.
Uh-huh. And
We played Halloween night the night. I guess we did Halloween night. It was CMJ, and it's in front of McSorley's, which I understand is the oldest tavern in New York City.
huh,
But we played the Marquee maybe with the Fluid, the Laughing Hyenas, Flowerhead, and an up and coming band called Rage Against the Machine.
no kidding.
Um,
Wow.
that was the night before, and then we had a photo shoot at McSorley's the next day. So it was kind of a
Hmm.
multi-purpose trip.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. So would you say that's the first real band you played in?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't. No, not
Yeah, I don't mean
necessarily.
that as an insult to previous bands, but the first thing that you
That's the
said,
first band
wow,
I
this could
toured
really
in.
be something. Yeah.
The first band I truly toured in for sure.
Hmm.
But no, I wouldn't say the first real band I played in. I mean, I had the pleasure and the honor of playing in a great band called Baboon. It's one of my favorite bands from North
Yeah.
Texas. And
That was
you know,
before Funland?
that was yeah. I joined Baboon
Okay.
before Funland, and then I wound up doing both for a time. But then Funland started touring, and we got busier, and it just seemed. I knew I wanted to continue doing Funland, but it didn't seem decent to the Baboon guys to string them
Hmm.
along
Hmm.
or anything like that. And they had already met Steve Barnett, who's a fantastic drummer, and he became their drummer and has been ever since. But at any rate, I just couldn't. It felt like I was on two boats, or I
Yeah.
had feet on two different rafts, and I had to make a choice, and I did. So Funland was the first real touring band I was ever in,
Hmm.
and we were hitting the road pretty regularly by the time I was 20 years old. I mean,
Yeah.
that's when the education really started. The road education really started around 19 or 20.
And it's been quite a ride. I mean, Centro-matic started. when 95?
95, and the first live performance I think was, well, I remember I was driving the other day and I realized, it was March 6th, 1996, so that puts it at what, 26 years now, and then Redo the
Wow.
Stacks came out. It'll be 25 years old, in just a couple weeks, matter of fact. So, yeah, that's when, the whole
And,
Centro thing started kinda kicking out, was 95, 96.
and that legendary cassette that you put out before that, what year would that have been?
The non-directional jetpack race one?
Yeah, man.
Think I was hand dubbing those in my bedroom on Hickory Street, in the fall of '95.
Things have changed a little bit in the way we record, the way we make music. Has your I'm curious, how has your songwriting changed? I mean, you kind of all of a sudden just had. I've heard you talk about the fact that those first three records were all pretty much recorded the same week, right? And you've always been a guy who's very prolific with respect to songwriting. And to me, it doesn't seem to have changed that much. I mean, there are definitely differences, but how is, from your perspective, how has your songwriting changed in these 25 years?
This is a conversation that goes back to, I guess, something Patterson Hood and I were talking about 5 or 10 years ago. But I'm not writing as much as I used to back in those days,
Hmm.
and a lot of that isn't because of the want, but it's more just time constraints and focus, and clearing my head out to where I feel like I can see the world in a clear enough way to really get back to writing. There are certain time luxuries that I don't have now that
I've lost you, Will. I don't know if you can hear me, but you're frozen on this end.
if I get those chunks of time, I really try to nurture them and make the most of them. And so, not writing as much as I used to, but I feel like I'm appreciating it more and respecting it more. And honestly, with that, I think I'm working harder at it because it's just a slightly rarer thing right now.
Sometimes less is more. Well, I want to ask you about your approach to lyrics because a lot of your songs. I don't know about a lot of your songs, but some of your songs, you sort of know what's going on. It's not going to be a Tom T. Hall straight ahead narrative, but there is a story in there being told for sure. But some of your songs, like I think Patterson said, man, I know every word to those songs, but I don't know what the hell they're about. And 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 I have kind of a similar approach to my own lyric writing that, and for me, I think I'm so afraid, I think, of being cliche. And if I try to tell a story in a straight ahead way, it's just
Right.
so easy. It's so easy to slip into cliche. And also, I've always enjoyed both more impressionistic kind of writing as well as art. At art museums, I've always been compelled by those paintings that I don't understand. As opposed to being blown
I can.
away and admiring a painter who is more of a realistic painter. I have great admiration for their technique, but I'm not compelled by those paintings as much as I am some of those paintings by someone like Gerhard Richter, where I don't really understand what's going on here, but it's so compelling. And similar with language, how do you think in terms of language and the way you write songs?
Well, I mean, it usually starts with a line or two that just keeps me interested, and
Hmm.
that I feel like, frankly, just turns me on enough to pursue.
Hmm.
Um, that's not to say that I'm not going to write story songs every once in a while. It feels good. I mean, if you feel like the story's compelling enough, you should definitely follow it. But by and large, I've always tried to work with language or with pieces of language that keep me interested, and also that don't necessarily that aren't necessarily going to hold the listener's hand. I think there's a lot to be gleaned from interpretation and from that abstract approach to language. And some have used the word painterly, I suppose, and impressionistic. would be another, but a lot of my favorite writers are that way. I mean, I think about
Yeah.
the writing of, say, Stephen Malkmus or
Right.
Richard Buckner. It's like they're not going to hold your hand all the way through a
Mhm.
song,
Yeah.
but man, they're going to give you images to go on, and those with those images, this goes back to what Patterson said. With those images, it's my hope that the lyrics will become natural in the mind, and then you're left to your own interpretation. There have been a number of times where someone will come up to the merch booth and ask flat out what a song means, but 10 times out of 10, I'm way more interested in hearing what their interpretation
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
than skewing my explanation of what I think it means.
Hmm.
It's always more interesting, and I don't want to ruin their impression of the song
Yeah.
by telling them what I think it means. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's been a lot of, I was an English major. I was a lit major in college and graduated with it. And books have inspired me as much as anything in this life as far as songwriting goes. And a lot of the time, it really is just a word or a collection of words, or just like a set to begin with, or a conversation to begin with, that sends a song on its way down the path.
Hmm.
And if it keeps going, when then in my opinion, it's worth the pursuit.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm betting, well, maybe I should be presumptuous, but for me, the sound of the words themselves have to fit like a glove in that moment of the melody. And
Yeah,
so for me, it's almost like what was the legendary thing with Paul McCartney writing yesterday? He went around singing ham and eggs or something, and tell because he knew sort of a sound that had to fit. And
yeah,
and and I think that Rick Rubin thing, he talks even about how, oh, this one called for a softer sound here, this one called for a harder sound.
yeah,
And so for me, I kind of paint with words a little bit in the sense that it's the sound is more important than the meaning, and the meaning tends to kind of follow that. You
yeah.
have that feeling too?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that's when you know you're really onto something. When those
Mhm.
syllables and those, say, long I sounds or long E sounds are matching up with the melody, and then furthermore matching up with your narrative that you're working with, then that to me is the feeling of like, okay, cool. I put my antenna in the air and managed to grab a song somewhere out of the ether, and I gotta this. I owe it to this song to see it through.
Yeah,
And there are
yeah,
hundreds that I have not seen through that I feel like I'm forcing the issue, and I'll just have to let them go. But
yeah.
man, sometimes they arise at the most inconvenient times, and I'm sure you know that. But
Mhm.
it's like you gotta pull the car over, or you gotta stop and, like, take a couple of notes, or a lot of the time I'll be out on a trail run, and I'll run as fast as I can back to the house or the car just to get the notes down,
Yeah,
so I don't lose it, because losing it is the worst. Man, it's a terrible feeling, you
yeah,
know?
it is, and we've all been there. It
Yeah,
fortunately it's so much easier now with phones. You usually
yeah,
have your phone together and you can make a quick recording. I think I've shared this on another one of these conversations, but the comedian Mitch Hedberg said, I write jokes for a living, and so if I'm laying in bed or something and a joke comes to me and I'm too lazy to get up and write it down, I have to convince myself that it's not funny.
yeah.
Uh, yeah. Well,
There's a lot of truth to that, and there, most every songwriter will tell you that a song or a melody or a line will come to them in the middle of the night, and you promise yourself you're going to remember it. You're not
yeah,
going to forget it at all.
yeah, yeah,
And I've done that so many times. It's like there's no way I could possibly forget this line. There's no way I could possibly forget it. Well, it's always worth switching the light on and writing it down, because I never remember. I
Do
never
you
get it back,
do you ever
or I might,
dream? Do you ever
but it won't.
write in your dreams where you literally write a
Yeah,
piece of a song? Yeah,
yeah, for sure.
yeah.
There's a song at the end of a record called Vultures Await that I put out called Nothing But Godzilla. That it was one of those songs that just kind of showed up about 3 or 4 in the morning, and I thought to myself, man, if I don't get up and write this down, it's gone. And that's where the lesson really started. That it's worth it. It's worth
Mhm,
flipping on the light and just getting it.
mhm.
And it's a pain, and it's not terribly fun, but man, in the grand perspective, it's nothing. we're not we're not working in quarries here, you know. You
That's
get up
right.
before you turn on, you write it down, and you go back
Yeah.
to bed.
Yeah. Hey, I want to ask you a question I've asked others in this series, and I usually ask it with respect to Bob, but it can be anyone who you have great reverence for, who, if you can imagine, maybe in this last run you did with John Morland, if all of a sudden you looked up in the middle of a song and there's Bob Dylan standing in front of you, or Neil Young, or whoever, someone that you have great reverence for and would maybe even make you a little bit nervous. If Bob or whoever your person that you choose is shows up at your door today and says, "Will, play me one of your songs," what song would you play?
Oh goodness. I probably play them. You know, I probably play them this new one. It's called "Of Passengers Imply." I wrote it about a month ago, and I took it on the road and tried it out a few times, and it went over okay. And it's just kind of where my mindset is right now in the wake of this, in the wake of lockdown, in the wake of the holidays, and after a couple of challenging months right after the holidays. I wouldn't play it for him because I think it's necessarily my best song, but I'd play it for him because I think it's kind of it's most accurately where I'm at mentally and spiritually right at this time, and so it's a brand new one.
My bandmates like to tease me that John's favorite song is always his most recent song that he's
Yeah.
written. So, but that's a really eloquent way to put it. Okay, so you play that song for Bob, and then Bob says, "Great, now play me a cover." What comes to mind? What cover would you play?
I'm not sure. I'm not a big covers player, and part of the reason neither was the band. I mean, the band would delve
Right.
into pretty easy little, like, we'd jump into covers every once in a while, but for the most part, I think that was rooted in the fact that there was so much of our original material to constantly chip away at and learn how to play that I've
Mhm.
never been a big covers player. I'm not sure. I have to think about that one a little bit. Maybe I'll come
Okay.
back to that one again.
Yeah, yeah. If something comes up. Hey, and by the way, you're freezing up quite a bit, and I'm losing you a
Okay.
little bit. Let's go ahead and press on, and hopefully that'll get better. I think it's not too
Try to
bad.
move. I can try
It,
to move somewhere in the house if that'll improve things. I can try to pick a new spot closer to
we can
the
try it.
source.
Yeah,
So
we
if
can
you'll be
try it.
patient, we
Uh,
can walk
uh,
together.
okay. Um, let's stay on music just a little bit before we move into your painting and your novel. Um, I think you shared with me before that one of your influences growing up, and it surprised me a little bit, was John Denver when you were a kid. And
Yeah,
I,
yeah.
I was there too, man. He was there was something about him. But who are some of the other people that you can remember, especially young, that you listen to and you feel has probably inspired you or influenced you in some way?
The part of the reason of that is because he was my first. Oh, I'm pretty dark here, but I'm gonna do my best. Here, there.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine.
Um, he was my first concert I ever went to in God,
Hmm.
1974. I was 3 years old, and my mother took me to the Mid South Coliseum in Memphis. And according to her, I never sat down for the whole show. I was so excited to see him, and I'd been listening to his records a lot when I was a
Hmm.
little dude. At a very early age, she taught me how to work the record player, and that became a real physical interaction, with just the interaction with vinyl and listening to music and looking through album art. And John Denver was kind of a big player in the house, and there, like uh, for a little kid, man, those some of the imagery within those songs about places that I had never been,
Hmm.
about mountains and natural landscape, and these soaring melodies, it was really appealing to me as a child. And so that's where some of my first memories of just song imagery came from. And also, he just seemed kind of like a nice dude. So
Hmm.
the John Denver thing was a big player when I was a little guy for sure.
Yeah,
And of course, like I mentioned, the first concert I went to, so there was something of a soft spot for him.
sure. And I believe I've heard you say you kind of got into Rush a bit when you were a little older.
Yeah, yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. I mean, that's another product of just like small town Missouri living, and the older kids and Camaros
Hmm.
and things like that riding around town with that stuff blasting out of their cars, and
Sure.
going to the record store and moving pictures is on top-notch volume. It's like, what's the story here? And so yeah, I got pretty into Rush, and I still listen to those records from time to time. I mean, if I'm scanning through the FM dial somewhere on the road, and Working Man is on or something, it's like I'm stopping.
Hmm.
It is still deeply satisfying on a certain level to me, and
Nice.
I am shameless about that.
Yeah. So you just came off a tour with John Moreland. Who would you like to be on a bill with that you've never been on a bill with?
Oh goodness. That's a great question. Man, I'm listening to so much strange, like not strange, but just ambient music these days.
Hmm.
It'd be really cool to share a bill with, say, Six Organs of Admittance or someone like that. Instrumental, long, long tones. That's just kind of where my head's been over these last couple of years, and I don't think that's any accident.
Okay.
Um, just given the time, but I think that'd be a really neat bill for sure. I'd love that.
Right on. And uh, if you, this is one of those kind of silly cliche questions, but I think it's a good question. It's that question: if you were on a deserted island, there's a turntable on that island, but you only get to bring one album. What comes to mind? And if you
Yeah,
want to cheat and mention a couple of them, that's fine.
I froze up on that question the other day, and the problem is, it almost depends on the day. It would probably
Yeah.
be some very much in the moment. Today it might be like an Odetta record, like
Wow.
or something like that. There's something so calming and comforting about her voice. I've been listening to her a lot here at the house, but also uh, might be Stars of the Lid, something also instrumental and ambient.
Okay.
Probably
Okay.
something along those lines.
Right on. Well, I want to ask you a little bit about the painting, and thank you so much for doing these two. I'm really proud to hang them on the wall and get a lot of great compliments about them. One of the things that kind of blows my mind about your painting, and I don't know, maybe this is kind of like someone coming up to you at the merch table and saying, "Tell me what this song means," but it kind of blows my mind that you are able to pull off that kind of folk art kind of looking painting, because I feel like if I tried to do that, it just wouldn't work. And I don't know if it's because you come at it with a sincerity that allows that to work, or what it is. But let me just ask you how you started painting that way, and yeah, just give me some insight into that style that you have with that these two paintings here might show.
It started about 15 years ago. I'd moved into a new little apartment by myself after a breakup, and just had there's a lot of wall space to fill, and I knew I'd been wanting to mess around a little bit more seriously with painting. So I just honestly, as a way to just start filling wall space, I started painting tributes to baseball players that I
Right.
admired.
Right.
And so some of the first ones were Roberto Clemente and Buck O'Neill and Alta Weiss. And I really just wanted to fill the space and experiment and see if I could create something that was pleasing to my eye, or find things to work on to make them better. And so I just kind of kept going with it for a year and a half, 2 years. And that led to friends, requesting commissions, and then that led to us a small art show at Cactus Music down in Houston,
Okay.
um, and then that it just kind of went from there. And so this at this point, it's definitely uh, it's it's become something that I'm doing a lot of commissions these days, and
Hmm.
definitely building art shows, and I'm grateful for that. It definitely saved my hide numerous times during the lockdown. But the reason for doing it still remains the same, and that I just want to learn more about these subjects. And
Hmm.
each painting tends to teach me a little something new
Hmm.
with each cover. Even if it's the eighth time I've painted Dale Murphy, I tend to learn something new about his, like,
Hmm. Hmm.
a certain year or a certain pattern that he just. the fact that he was a great catcher for a little while, like I'll just learn something new every once in a while. So
Hmm.
that's what I'm
Hmm.
kind of seeking through each piece.
Well, they're badass paintings. They're very unique. They're very Will Johnson, and I may have to commission a third one. By the way, I've been thinking about that.
You don't have the space in there. What are we gonna do?
Well, we can rotate things out, right?
Okay.
Yeah. Uh, so let me ask you about the novel. Someone I was talking to the other day said they were talking about you, and they said something to the extent, "Well, okay, now that I've put out 6 records this year and made 40 paintings, I'm going to toss off a novel real quickly." And I said, "Look, man, I'll bet Will would tell you that that was one of the hardest things he ever did. Is that true?"
Yeah, without a doubt. There's no question about it. There was definitely a lot of starting and stopping and starting over and standing up and sitting down and taking a lot of walks. And um, but slowly, as that continued to happen over the beginning attempts of it, I just realized that this is not making a record and this is not making a
Yeah.
painting. This is the kind of thing that it's not going to be glamorous and it's not always going to be pleasing. And you have to recalibrate your mind to do that. You understand this, but like as far as making a record goes, it's a fairly short amount of time. And assembling such a thing, you can write it over the course of 6 weeks or 2 months, and then you track it over the course of a week or two and master it and send it off to the big factory in the sky, and then bam, you got a record out feasibly within a pretty short amount of time. Um, but with a book, you one has to recalibrate themselves and shift the gears to understand that this is something that will take years potentially, and that's okay. It's going to have to breathe and take breaks. And um, part of a little bit of the conundrum was at the very beginning when Goliad they didn't mandate anything as far as what they wanted. They said that this could be fiction or memoirs or road stories or drawings or a hybrid book. It could be any or all, whatever I wanted to do. So um, there were no real lines in the sand. And sometimes it's nice to have some lines in the sand just to know how you want to operate. This comes from an obsessive four tracker, like I, I'm limited, so I've really got to work within this space. But to be given that much room to roam took a little while to get used to. And after agreeing, I mean, goodness, it was almost 3 years after we agreed to do the book that I finally really got some footing on it and really started running with it. So, and all from the handshake agreement to do the book to the time it came out, it was 4.5 years. Or no, that's not correct. Maybe 5.5 years.
Wow. Well,
So it's
yeah, I do understand some of that. As the book project that I'm involved in right now, and it has surprised me. I guess I'm probably more of an instant gratification guy than I realized, because that slow, painstaking process, especially when you have a lot of people involved,
yeah,
man,
that's another.
it's herding cats sometimes, but it's a labor of love, and I'm looking forward to getting that thing out. It's been a lot of fun. I'll just say, for those who don't know, it's a book about you, and we've gotten some fantastic contributions from people like Jason Isbell and Patterson Hood and Jim James and others. And you're probably gonna weep a little bit when you read some of these, because they're singing your praises, my friend.
I remain largely intimidated, but equally honored that
Yeah.
such a thing would be coming to fruition. So please, I hope you understand that.
Absolutely, I do. I know you well enough to know that that's sincere. Well, let me hit you with some, as we kind of wind down here. Let me hit you with some kind of rapid fire questions, and they're intended to be quick answers, but you can either just say pass, or give the quick answer, or you can say I'll answer it, but I don't want to make a quick answer.
Okay.
Your choice. So let's see. If I say, who are your heroes? Who comes to mind?
Goodness, I'm not much of a hero person, but uh, one of my favorite humans to exist is my favorite baseball player of all time, is Roberto Clemente. So
Mhm.
I'll say Roberto Clemente.
I think I've shared with you that I got to see him play in the World Series, and then got to be within a few feet of him the next day at the airport, which was, as a kid, was just etched in my memory. I'll never forget that moment.
Yeah.
He was larger than life, man. Such an important person. What pisses you off?
Oh my goodness. Let's see here. Talkers at quiet shows.
Mm,
I mean, just shameless loud talkers at quiet
yeah,
shows.
yeah,
The
yeah.
kind where you realize that they're they're totally aware of what they're doing.
Mm. When I was talking to Brent Best about you, he used that as an example. He said, while he himself gets pissed off routinely, he said he's almost never seen you be pissed off. But he said the one time he does remember a time you got pissed off many years ago, that someone was they just kept requesting a song or something, and they just kept interrupting things.
Oh,
And
right. Yeah, I
yeah,
remember.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
But he
I'll
said
say
the funny thing is you were still incredibly gracious to that person, even though he knew you were not too happy.
I remember
Yeah.
that moment. Yeah, I'll say talkers at shows and those individuals that, and this goes to I would say flat out class racism, but the individual that thinks that because you don't make much money must mean that you are not that intelligent.
Yeah.
That pisses me off. That
Yeah.
infuriates.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, it's sadder than anything, but it definitely would qualify as something that pisses me off.
Yeah. What are you most proud of?
My family.
Mhm. Yep. I knew that's what you would say. And I understand. I'm the same way. Do you have a morning routine? Do you have something you do every morning?
Yeah, I do.
And if you don't mind sharing it, if you don't want to, that's okay too.
No, that's okay. I get about 3 steps of coffee in me and try to, diffuse any drama that might already be happening and get the kids going, and, that's kind of my morning routine, really.
Okay.
Not much to it. It's just a matter of getting everybody kinda moving in one direction and out the door in time.
If you had to choose one word that is the secret sauce to having a happy life, what would that word be?
Goodness, I think patience.
Yeah. Good. Good. Let's see. Why? Okay, this may not be a short answer, but try. Why baseball? I know baseball is very important to you. Why baseball?
The the fact that it often feels like, as Willie Mays put it, violence under wraps. I mean, it's a chess match, and
Hmm.
there's so much going on mentally that I'll never understand about the game, and I'm fine with that. I mean,
Hmm.
it's not just physical ability, but it's so mental, and the psychological aspect of um, that many games over the course of a season and having to stay sharp over the course of that many games for that long is deeply impressive to me. But yeah, it comes back to the violence under wraps feeling. It just feels like it's tense. It's a very tense, cerebral sport to pay mind to. So I think that's why.
Yeah, we share that love. Do you have any guilty pleasures? Anything
Goodness,
that someone might be surprised to hear about you?
I don't know. I
You don't
mean,
have time for them anymore, do you?
really, I'm pretty open about it all. I don't know. Nothing feels terribly guilty these
Yeah,
days. I
yeah.
mean, I'm an open book.
Well, is there anything though that people would be surprised? Maybe not people who know you best, but people who kind of tangentially know you, if they found out about you, would say, "Oh, that surprised me about him."
I don't know. I mean, we could go back to the Rush thing. I mean,
Okay.
that tends to surprise a number of people. Sometimes
Or
when
John
some
Denver.
find out that I'm a Rush fan, it's like, oh my god, I never would have pegged you for that. So
Yeah.
that
Okay.
crops up from.
Okay. What do you do to deal with the slings and arrows of life? Do you have a practice? Do you meditate? Do you have any particular practice or any kind of methodology for dealing with the inevitable shit that we all have to deal with?
Sure. I mean, it's I'm pretty open about this, and I know you know this, but I'm just an avid. I try to stick to running and trail running. I mean, that's kind of my church, so to speak.
Hmm.
To use a cliche, but it is. It's definitely the mental, it helps with the mental stuff as much as it does the physical. And I've leaned on it ever since I was about 9 years old.
When you're running, I'm curious about this because I think you know that I'm pretty deep into meditation. You may not know that, and I actually teach meditation and have been practicing many, many years. And sometimes when people say to me, "Oh yeah, my meditation is running," I can't help but question that a little bit. Maybe, yeah, maybe, but I wonder, where is your mind? What I want to say to those people: where is your mind when you're running? And so I'll just ask you, where is your mind typically when you're running? Are you contemplating things? Are you ruminating about things? Or are you just focused on what's happening right here and now?
Most of the time, I'm contemplating things, and I know
Hmm.
it's a good run when I lose myself in it, and I don't maybe remember the last 2 or 3 miles.
Hmm.
Like I
Yeah.
don't. I know that I'm finally hitting the pocket when it becomes such a natural rhythm and such a natural movement that the last 20 minutes are foggy to me.
Hmm.
That's where I want to get. I mean,
Yeah.
that's borderline intoxicating once you kind of get to that level, and it takes a couple of miles to start hitting those pockets. But that's when I know that it's becoming rewarding in its way, and I'm not just thinking about minutia or trying to sort a few things out.
Hmm.
It truly becomes meditative.
It reminds me of a line in one of my new songs, which is, and it's out of context, but you're never going to free yourself from this atmosphere until you learn to teach yourself how to disappear.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
great line.
Thank you. Let's see, a couple more. How about, what are you listening to? Or no, you already talked about that. What are you reading right now?
I'm reading Flannery O'Connor's Wise Blood. I'm about a third of the way through it. I never picked it up, and I wrote a song called
Oh,
"Wise Blood" for the
yeah, you
Marie
do.
Panther record, and I figured I needed to go ahead and dive into that.
Yeah, and any surprises there? Is it pretty much what you had expected it to be, and what are your impressions of it?
Oh goodness, I'm so early on in it that I'm not
Okay,
sure what I'm expecting it to be just yet. I'm just getting
okay.
a feel for days and kind of the interaction of these small town characters at the moment,
And
and for the
and
role that religion is going to play in this, and the role that religion is going to play in it, but also just the trickery amongst the characters involved. I'm just curious to see where it's going to go.
there just is something about the South. It's that comes through in that book and other similar books that it's hard to explain. But and this may not be a fair question. You and I have talked about some of our favorite authors before, but similar to the One Record and the Deserted Island, if you had to take a couple of books, and I know
Mhm.
that's so hard, but what comes to mind?
Oh goodness, I mean, it's hard for me not to think of a book that I would definitely take to an island would be the short stories of Breeze Pancake. That's
Yeah,
one that I come back to every 10 or 12 years, and
those
it's
are hard stories, though, man. They're
they are,
painful.
they're really tough. They're tough stories and they're painful, but at the same time, that's why I keep coming back to them, because it's kind of like a magical record, and that you hear something a little new with each listen. And so, if I come back to it and every 8 or 10 years, I tend to see or sense something new that maybe I missed
Mhm.
earlier on. So
Yeah,
that to me is a good sign.
yeah. It is terrific writing. There's no doubt about it. Okay, two more questions. Uh,
Sure.
one, what happens when we die?
So I don't know. I'm no one to profess that. Hopefully, I don't know. Hopefully, eternal rest and peace. But who knows? Who really
Okay,
knows?
okay, yeah. I mean, there's no need for a hard and fast answer. I'm just curious how people think about that, and part of it will probably is the fact that I'll be 66 this year, and though I still am young for my age, so to speak, I think
Yeah.
it's inevitable that you start thinking about these things in a way that you never did. And
Yeah.
what's today? Today's Thursday. We only have so many Thursdays left.
That's right.
And
I mean, as my aunt puts it, I've probably got a lot more road behind me than I do ahead of me, and that's the case with both of us probably to a certain degree. So it's impossible for that to not start, creeping in here and
Mhm.
there, but
Yeah.
I know just as much now as I did then, which is very little on that. So
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I've gotten some great answers on that question, by the way, but most people have the same kind of response you did. Like, I don't know, it's not something that I'm not a theist
I'd
or
love to give you something very funny. I wish I could give you something witty and funny, but I don't know.
part of that is, and maybe it's too personal for you, I don't know, but part of that is designed to see if you have some sort of theism or if you have some sort of approach to the whole idea of this existence
Sure.
and if there's something beyond, but we don't have to go there.
No, that's okay. My theism, my religion relies largely upon things like karma and the golden rule and very simple acts of behavior.
Hmm.
And so beyond that, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, that does kind of lead into my last question, and which is, when you are dead and gone, what do you hope people will say about you?
Goodness. Hopefully that I was, a good father and a good husband and was a productive artist. And that's really about all I care about.
And those things are true today, so I think we will be saying that. By the way, I love the fact you've got paint on your hands. Have you been painting this
Yeah.
morning? Yeah, that's
Yeah.
great. That's
I'm
great,
painting
man.
Godzilla. I'm making a
Oh,
big
really?
Godzilla
Okay.
today.
Yeah. Well, hey, man, I'm a huge fan of yours, and I really cherish the opportunity to get to know you and spend some time with you. I really appreciate you taking the time to connect, especially right now, because I know you're in the middle of a busy run. Thank you so much, man.
Man, thank you, John. It's an honor always and a complete joy to talk with you. And I hope we get to circle back and add to all this at some point.
Yeah, maybe we'll have a part 2 down the road.
Sounds perfect.
All right, man. Thank you. Take care.
Thanks, John. See you.